Ladies and gentlemen, if I can bring matters to order. A very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to this afternoon's event, examining the future of raw milk regulations in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And welcome to you as well if you're watching this event via our online feed, and I know a number of you are, so you are very welcome as well. My name is Julian Warwicker. I've been asked by the FSA to preside over this afternoon's proceedings. I approach that task with an entirely open mind, not that my view matters a jot, as I have frequently told callers to Radio 5 Live and Radio 4 over the years, and they tend to reaffirm that in return, and that's even when they're phoning in about something the BBC has done and probably shouldn't have done in recent times. A few little bits of housekeeping for you, first of all. As you came in, you no doubt discovered where the cloakroom and the toilets are, back to the staircase, beyond them, and then either side. The fire exits are fairly clearly marked in the rooms, with the green indicators above them. I'm reliably informed that there is no test planned for this afternoon, so if the fire alarm goes off, they mean it. So if you can then proceed in an orderly fashion towards the exits, and eventually the idea is that you should assemble outside Parnell House, which is just to the side of this building, but hopefully that will not concern you at any point. And the normal message about mobile phones, ideally off, but certainly silent, please, if they aren't already. Now, this afternoon, let me give you a sense of the format that we're planning here. We're going to split things into two halves, broadly. Between now and between about 3:15, you'll hear from an array of speakers with different backgrounds, different points of view, different expertise. The FSA have told me that they're keen for me to generate as much discussion as possible during the afternoon. So with each of those speakers, I'm happy to take comments, questions, observations based on what you have just heard from each one after they've finished what they're saying. All I'd ask at this point is that you keep your powder dry over making more general points until the second session, when there will be a longer opportunity to address some of the wider issues that I know many of you are keen to see aired. We've put aside quite a bit of time in that second half for a more general debate and discussion. If you want to be heard, the best way is the old-fashioned way of raising your hand and attracting my attention, and rest assured I will keep a mental note of those who I see doing that at various points. If you can see on my table there a little screen-type gadget, it's because I'm also going to be fed comments via those of you watching online. So as you watch online, if something particularly crosses your mind that you want to see raised, by all means send it in, and they will appear in front of me on that screen via my colleagues at the back of the room, and I'll drop those into the discussion as well as we proceed. A final word from me before we start, and it's only brief because I don't want to steal the thunder of others. On the background to today, the FSA, of course, reviewing the raw milk regulations over the last 2 years, published its consultation on the 30th of January, setting out the options for the future. And today, they say, is an important part of that consultation process. And there is then a clear timetable ahead, which you will hear outlined, of course, during the rest of the afternoon. Enough from me, though, on the subject of that background. Otherwise, as I say, I'll steal the thunder of some of our speakers. Most notably at this point, a brief word, if I may, with the FSA's Chief Executive, Catherine Brown, who I know is sitting down at the front of the room. Just, Catherine, a few words on the thinking behind today, first of all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Julian. Well, thank you very much to everybody for coming. The chair of our board, Tim Bennett, and myself and all the officials who are here are looking forward very much to hearing the discussion and all your views. I think clearly the good turnout we've got today, which is our first kind of experiment, if you like, in this format of consultation, is a tribute to the strength of views that people have about this very important issue. And that's why we thought we'd have a meeting, so that we could really appreciate those views and people's feelings about this issue, and not just look at the more traditional paper-based responses. And that's part of our kind of ongoing efforts to be always more and more open in the way that we engage with people and try and talk about the evidence and food safety issues. I hope very much, I'm very much looking forward to listening and to hearing different perspectives. I hope very much that we'll all be able to listen to each other in the spirit of openness that Julian referred to. And certainly I know that I am bound to learn a lot this afternoon, and I hope that other people will also hear at least snippets that are new to them. So looking forward to it very much. Thank you very much indeed.
And Catherine, just a word to you about where this issue ranks, because clearly the FSA is dealing with a whole array of very important issues in a variety of different fields. Where does this one stand?
I think this is a very important issue for us because of the interplay between scientific evidence and people's choices and the sense of balancing risk and choice. So in that sense, it's a very important issue, and that again is why we thought it was really worthwhile having this wider discussion about this issue.
Okay, Catherine, thank you very much indeed. We're now to the first of our main speakers to give you an overview of the consultation, the options, and the FSA's preferred way forward. Please welcome the Director of Policy at the FSA, Steve Wern. Steve.
Thank you, Julian. So my task today is to provide you with a bit of context to today's event and the wider consultation. This had its genesis back in a discussion that the FSA board had a couple of years ago now around the microbiological safety of raw drinking milk and cream. And as a result of that discussion, the board commissioned us to undertake a review of the current controls and any alternative approaches there might be. The geographical scope, as Julian has already said, is England, Wales and Northern Ireland, not because we want to leave Scotland out, but because sales of raw milk have been prohibited in Scotland since 1983. So we're setting them to one side because we're talking about the controls in those countries where sales are permitted. And what we've undertaken since that point, since that board discussion, is a thorough review. We've looked at the current evidence that others have collected over the past couple of decades, and we've also commissioned and undertaken new research of our own, particularly into stakeholder and consumer views. So to remind people what the current controls are in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, they're permitted. Raw cows drinking milk sales are permitted, but on a restricted basis, which means that sales are only permitted direct to consumers at the farm gate or in farming catering establishments or through milk groundsmen. They're permitted sales by farmers at farmers markets and through the internet, direct sales through the internet, but all other sales, including, for example, vending machines in retail establishments, are prohibited. Also, raw milk has to be labelled. So that consumers know it's not being heat treated and that it may contain organisms harmful to health. And in terms of the official controls, so the controls that happen behind the scenes, if you like, there are stringent hygiene standards that apply on farms selling raw cows drinking milk, and those are inspected more frequently than farms that are producing milk that's pasteurised. There are, however, no restrictions on the sales of raw drinking milk from species other than cows, and that's an issue that we'll come back to as we talk about the consultation. So, how did we frame our review? What was important to us in framing it? Well, this goes to the heart of the central purpose of the Food Standards Agency. Actually, our single statutory purpose, when you look at the legislation that set us up, that we're here to protect public health in relation to food and consumers' other interests in relation to food. And as Catherine has already said, this is an issue where we need to balance the full range of those considerations. So in this review about raw drinking milk, our objective is to make sure that the controls that are in place manage those food safety risks in a way that's proportionate and based on our best knowledge and understanding of the risks. So in terms of the review, first of all, we collated all of the evidence we could find, science, consumer and stakeholder, insights, controls applied internationally and what happens in other countries, both in terms of controls and impacts of illness related to raw drinking milk. We then took that evidence, analysed it to develop a range of policy options, and we came up with 4. These cover the whole range of things that we could do, from a requirement to pasteurise all milk prior to sale, as currently in Scotland at one end, through to the removal of all of the current sales restrictions on raw drinking milk from all species at the other end. The preferred option, which is something we defined for the purpose of the consultation, although it in no way prejudges the view that our board might take after the consultation has ended, is to harmonise and clarify the current controls that apply. So what does that mean in practice? Well, it means to continue to allow restricted marketing of raw drinking milk, cows' raw drinking milk, sales at the farm gate from farmers' markets, directly from the farmer online, and vending machines at the farm. But to provide some guidance, to clarify the rules around other sales routes, recognising that over the past couple of decades, since the last review, a whole range of new channels of sales have become available. And also to work with the producers of raw drinking milk from species other than cows to aim to harmonise and align controls for all the species. And also to harmonise the labelling of raw drinking milk across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, because the labelling requirements are different in the different countries at present, so that all consumers are given that consistent information about the food safety risks from consumption of raw milk. And at the heart of this is our assessment that although the potential public health risks from the pathogens present in raw drinking milk are high, we believe that the current controls are effective in controlling those risks. Looking at one indicator, outbreaks of illness related to raw drinking milk, there have been none in England, Wales and Northern Ireland for the past decade, which, although it's just an indicator rather than an assessment of the total health impacts of consumption of raw drinking milk, we think gives us a degree of confidence about the effectiveness of the current controls, given that, amongst other things, what they do is restrict sales, which is why we call them restricted sales. So we're now in the consultation phase. And the purpose of today, as the meeting, if you like, in many ways at the heart of our consultation, is it's an opportunity for us to hear your views. So we don't intend to answer in detail the full range of questions you might want to ask today. Certainly we'll log them. We'll answer them all with all of the other questions that emerge during the consultation. But we want primarily to hear from you today. If the points you make are unclear, we might ask you to clarify them. If you make points about new evidence that we haven't found or accessed or assessed, then we might probe you to give us details of that evidence, just so that we can ensure that our review and the consultation process and the information that our board is asked to make a decision on is complete as possible. So the sorts of things we're asking about in the consultation is whether you agree with our preferred option or whether you have an alternative option that you prefer, and why, what the grounds are for it. Whether the harmonised labelling we're proposing for cows' raw drinking milk works for you, and if not, whether there are alternatives, and if you're a producer, what the costs may be in you switching from one type of labelling to another. And thinking about controls or aligning controls from other species with those on cows' raw drinking milk, how we might best achieve that. Anything from new legislation to a voluntary code of practice that's owned by and run by the producers and the industry. So your views on what might be effective there. And also the underpinnings of our consultation, of our assessment and our impact assessment, whether our data are correct, whether we've got the size of the industry right, whether the assumptions around costs that we've included make sense for you. So those are the things on which we're asking for people's views in the period of consultation that runs right up until the end of April. We'll then go back to the FSA board. They'll discuss at an open meeting that, like this one, will be web streamed and people will be able to view, to come up with the final view, the final opinion, the final position of the FSA. So I hope you are able to educate us all, to bring your thoughts to the table, to make sure we have as wide as possible an appreciation of what people's thoughts are on raw drinking milk and on the consultation, and what the outcome is that you would like to see, and just as importantly, why. Thank you very much.
Steve, thank you very much indeed for that. At this point, are there any specific points that anybody would like to raise based on what you've heard from Steve at this juncture? by all means raise your hand and a microphone will find you if you want to say anything at this point. You have silenced the room. On the subject of the consultation, I was just keen to ask at this point in time, as you've outlined the preferred option that the FSA has, have you given a great deal of thought to the kind of comment, observation or evidence that might change that preferred option at this point?
Well, I think what we have aimed to do through the review process is to be as thorough as possible in assessing the scientific evidence out there and the full range of stakeholder and consumer views. So although we may be surprised, although there may be insights or views that we haven't come across in the 2 years that we've been working on this since the board discussion, I'm hoping that we haven't missed anything major, that our consultation document as it stands is well founded, and it's now down to an issue of debating what the balance should be, what the proper balance should be between all of the considerations to make sure that the answer we come up with, that the board come up with, is proportionate and risk-based and reaches that balance between a public health impact and consumer choice.
Okay. Steve, thank you very much. Oh, there's a point here at the front. Gentleman here. Can you just pause a moment and then a microphone will come and find you, because it's important that we can all hear you.
It's gone to the top.
Ah, sorry. The gentleman at the back first, then I'll come to you. Sorry. Yes, the microphone's over there.
John Warner from Imperial College. I wonder whether there's a fifth option, and that is that you broaden access in terms of reduce the restrictions on sales, but retain the intense scrutiny of those that are marketing the raw milk.
I think that's inherent in any move towards liberalising sales or moving sales restrictions would be the maintenance of the official controls, if you like, behind the screen, as I refer to them, on farm, to make sure that the strictest hygiene criteria continue to be met, which means, amongst other things, that those farms would be visited and inspected considerably more frequently than farms producing milk that's pasteurised.
The gentleman at the front.
Hello. Can I ask you, regarding the research you've done around areas of health, 3 questions. One, have you researched incidents of illness in raw milk as from goats or sheep, which are presumably the 2 other areas? Have you done the analysis of disease present in pasteurised milk along the same pathogen-related disease that you've done? And finally, have you looked at the area of the prevalence or not of antibiotics in pasteurised milk and the disease implications of that?
Can I ask incidentally where you're from, sir, and what your name is?
I'm John. I'm a private concerned citizen, no more. Thank you.
It is difficult to assess the total public health impact of raw drinking milk, whether it's cows or even more so from other species where sales are more limited, because not all instances of foodborne illness, whether from raw drinking milk or anything else, are reported and followed up. I suppose looking at the outbreak data, which I referred to in my presentation, give one indication. But if you look at the pasteurisation process, I think it just stands to reason and underpins the advice from the Advisory Committee on Microbiological Safety of Food, and we'll hear from Sarah O'Brien, its chair, later, that the most effective way of controlling risks from microbiological risks from consumption of milk is pasteurisation. And I think that is clear to us in our assessment of the evidence. If you have a way of helping us understand the impacts of illness from consumption of raw drinking milk, other than that which we refer to in the consultation, which largely comes down to, firstly, the outbreak data from the countries of the UK, and secondly, from some comparative studies between the levels of control here and overseas, then we'd be very interested to hear from you.
One more, and then I'll move on. Yes.
From the outset...
What was your name?
My name is Donald McKinnon. I'm a consumer.
Okay.
From the outset, could you clarify whether any of these proposed regulations are going to affect the supply of milk to cheese makers? I know you stressed that this is raw drinking milk, but how does that... obviously, it's the same material. How are these regulations, proposed regulations, going to affect that part of the market? Because it is quite important, probably more important than raw drinking milk.
These proposals relate to raw drinking milk only. They don't affect unpasteurised milk used in cheese making. And the process of maturation on cheese making causes changes in pH and acidity, for example, that do impact on the survivability of pathogens in the cheese. And there's been extensive work undertaken for us by Camden BRI and by others that help us better understand the survivability of pathogens in unpasteurised milk cheese. This consultation relates only to raw drinking milk and cream.
Okay. One more, and then I will move on to the next speaker. Just lady there with... That's it.
Hi, I'm Larissa. I'm just a consumer. This gentleman made a point about the antibiotic aspect. I don't believe that you addressed that question that he had about the having testing for antibiotics in pasteurised milk.
I'd need to see if any colleagues have anything to hand on results of antibiotic testing of milk. I'm not getting anything, but certainly that's something if we... Can I ask in that case,
If that's an option for a little bit later on, maybe, if somebody can address that point a little later on, because clearly it's a concern of yours and of yours as well, sir. So I will aim, I think I'm getting some nods around the front table here, which would suggest that that will be dealt with a little bit later on. So I will make a note of it so that we don't forget it. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, because as I say, there will be plenty of opportunity later on in the afternoon to have more general points raised. Steve, thank you very much for the time being.